Hi, and thank you so much for joining our cortisol training with my good friend and Faster Way Scientific Advisory board member, Dr. Stephen Cabral. Dr. Cabral, thank you so much for being with us.
It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on the show.
And Stephen, you happen to know quite a bit about the subject of cortisol. And not only do you know about this subject, and we are going to bust some myths and share some valuable tips, but we are also going to tease a lab test that we have coming down the pike later this fall that will actually test cortisol levels morning, noon, night, and total, which I'm so excited about. But before we dive in, to all things cortisol, tell us when and why you entered into the wellness industry.
Well, one of those reasons, believe it or not, was directly related to cortisol. Now, most people, fortunately, will never have to deal with something called Addison's disease, which is your body's inability to produce cortisol. Most people, truthfully, are dysregulated in terms of cortisol. They usually, as they move through life and later in life, typically 40s, 50s, 60s, have lower AM cortisol output and unfortunately higher at night. We call that tired and wired. So basically, tired all day, need caffeine, but can't sleep well at night. And so that's a lot of people. But for me, think about never being able to produce cortisol at all throughout the day. So constantly inflamed, constantly flu-like symptoms, very weakened immune system, susceptible to autoimmune issues that I had. I got type 2 diabetes as a result of Addison's disease as well, because I couldn't properly regulate blood sugar. And many other health issues. So, not an enjoyable time, 17 years old to 27 years old. This was back in the 90s and early 2000s. But the good news is that I had to struggle for so long and I met with so many mentors and was able to learn so much that I was then one day able to share that now in what we do. And that's work with hundreds of thousands of people every single year with our global functional medicine practice. So, yeah, that's where I'm
Oh,
today. Full circle.
okay. Full circle. That is right. And it's interesting because you said when you struggled with Addison's disease, you weren't able to produce cortisol. And that actually already is addressing or hinting at a myth, which is cortisol is bad. Okay, there is so much confusion on social media, so many Instagram experts who say we want to lower your cortisol, we want to lower it. Cortisol is bad. Cortisol causes fat gain. Here's the deal, cortisol is necessary. You know it more than any of us. Not having cortisol is what created the flu-like symptoms, the autoimmune, and also too. I appreciate that you are a male. You are a guy who dealt with this because we have a lot of women, but also a handful of faster way fellas, I like to call them, who are also listening to this training. And cortisol is important for everyone, whether you are male or female. So Addison's disease in particular, and oh my goodness, you dealt with that at the age of 17. Do you have any inclination or do you know what brought that on?
So for me, I was a fairly sick kid, meaning I didn't know it at the time, but I was eating a lot of processed food, like a lot of people, right? Fruity Pebbles for breakfast, probably some Crystal Light with that as well, or some fruit juice, a little Debbie snack, mid-morning, cold cuts, deli meat at lunch. Who even knows mid-afternoon? Maybe, whatever I could find at the store, Skittles, Arizona iced tea, etc. And then we'd have like a fairly normal pasta dinner at night. So it's like, and then I'd have like ice cream, like Hood ice cream. And so it was a disastrous diet. But really, what happened was I was highly stressed in high school. I used to have a very hardcore perfectionist mindset, type A, wanted to graduate top of my class, wanted to do this, do well in sports, like all the things. It was just burning myself out. But also at the same time, I was on 3 years of twice a day antibiotics. So
Mm.
14 years old, I got put on them for acne, and I was on them through essentially 17 years old. And so from childhood on, I had swallowed over 3,000 capsules of amoxicillin, which is crazy. So it destroyed my innate immune system in my digestive system, in my gut, caused obviously leaky gut. Back in the 90s, they would laugh you out of a doctor's office if you're talking about that. Now, of course, we know increased intestinal permeability is a real thing. That set off high levels of inflammation, which set off high levels of cortisol. My body was always stressed, right? Between the mind and the body, I was stressed from both sides, and eventually just decimated my what's called HPA axis. So it's the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland in the mind, the brain, that tells your adrenals what to do. Your adrenals don't produce cortisol just all on their own. there's a perceived stress in your head, in your brain, that comes from internally endogenously or externally exogenously that tells your adrenals what to do. My stress was 24/7. I was a complete insomniac, couldn't sleep at night. If I fell asleep at all, it would take 2 to 3 hours, honestly, from about 10 years old on. And so that burnt out my adrenals over time. And then that led to the autoimmune issues that I had, the type 2 diabetes, the insomnia, the acid reflux. I mean, the POTS syndrome, the MCAS, the histamines, on and on. But it all really started from gut-based issues and stress, which affected my adrenals.
Oof. So the chronic inflammation and the chronically high levels of cortisol from the stress and that perfectionistic mindset, which I'm sure many of our listeners can relate with that type A personality. And so you really just ran yourself out of hormones. You completely tanked the cortisol. Let's talk about some of the key symptoms beyond what even you shared. And you did tease it a little bit as we began the training. Key symptoms that you have dysregulated cortisol. So for the ladies listening, share kind of that tired but wired phrase. What exactly does that refer to?
So tired but wired means that it starts with a wired at night, truthfully. So in the very beginning, there's 5 stages of adrenal essentially burnout, and we'll put that in air quotes. But what it means is that in the beginning, you're producing cortisol, high levels of cortisol throughout the day. Now, that's not normal. So how normal cortisol looks is that you produce your highest amount between 6 and 8 in the morning. Think of it as a natural cup of coffee. That's literally what it's meant to be. So it wakes you up in the morning, especially with sunlight, and then just gradually throughout the day, it literally just gently falls all the way throughout the day until about 9:30 p.m. It's based seasonally as to how long the sun's out. That then is its lowest point. When it starts to go down, as there's less blue light, again, if we have our blue light blockers on, or we, turn down our lights in our home or put on salt lamps, melatonin begins to rise. Melatonin begins to rise. Now we're tired. We get a great night's sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep, 90 minutes or so of deep sleep. And then if all of that happens, cortisol again rises at 6 to 8 in the morning. So it's a beautiful process. The problem is when we're overstressed, we have kids at home, we've got responsibilities, our mind stays active at night. We've got the blue lights on, we're staring at phones, we're worried about tomorrow's to-dos. All of these things are on our mind. Cortisol stays elevated. That is the start of a dysfunctional diurnal rhythm. As humans, we're meant to be diurnal, about 12 hours on and 12 hours off. So from like 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night, somewhere around there. And then 6:30 at night to 6:30 in the morning, that should be our off time. And we humans, we push it to the limit, right? So we might go 6 in the morning till 10 at night, 11 at night, whatever it might be. And we can see the window then for recovery is less. What happens then, our body starts to become more exhausted and we start to wake up with less and less cortisol production. When that happens, we have more reliance on caffeine or stimulants. It could be anything. It could be a cold plunge to a cold shower to a double espresso, but you need something to get you going because cortisol is no longer there. And then that doesn't stop the elevated cortisol at night. So what happens is we get low in the morning. Now we're tired and groggy and feeling puffy when we wake up. And then in the evening, though, we're still wired. We could sleep all day, but we can't fall asleep at night.
Okay. The very first description where you have the high cortisol in the morning, that described me perfectly. And again, I can't wait to do this test. It's just going to kind of prove to me that my cortisol is still in check. But let me just describe my experience. And then if you're listening, this is what your experience should be like. I mean, really, truly. So I never, ever set an alarm. I knew in my mind I needed to wake up by 6:30 today because I was driving the kids to school. So 6:29 a.m. as the sun's rising. I woke up naturally on my own. Very energetic in the morning. I do have a cup of purity coffee. Generally, after I break my fast, I switch over to matcha. But my cortisol declines all day. And Stephen, when I tell you, when the sun goes down, Amanda Truss is going to turn into a pumpkin. Like, you are not going to get anything out of me. Nothing. I am like in bed under the covers, sleep mask on, 9 p.m. I have been at dinner with colleagues, like important dinners, talking about partnerships. I order appetizers. The sun has gone down and I am like, I am so sorry. I have got to go. Like,
It's a great sign. It's a great sign that your cortisol is regulated, but also hormones such as estrogen and progesterone, because progesterone needs to be strong at night for women, especially going into perimenopause and stabilized in menopause. And the reason is that's what naturally calms your nervous system as well. So if you can calm your nervous system, you can calm your cortisol. We can talk more about that later.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, we should talk about that because there are so many different hormones involved in weight loss and fat loss in particular. And this is called the faster way after all. Okay, so key signs someone's cortisol rhythm is dysregulated if you are tired in the morning, if you are waking up and you even got that 7 to 9 hours of sleep and it's just so hard to get moving. Guess what? You might have low cortisol in the morning, which is not positive. And then the other sign is that you are tired but wired at night, hard to fall asleep. Maybe you do fall asleep, but then you're up at 2 in the morning, for example, is also another sign. So we have kind of those different symptoms, puffiness, inflammation as well.
Yeah, weight gain around the middle, which I didn't mention. That's an important one because, especially as women move into menopause, estrogen used to hold more weight around the hips and thighs. But as estrogen declines in perimenopause and then definitely in menopause, what happens is there is not the same level of estrogen that would move weight gain or weight around the hips in general, and it will instead move it to your stomach. So if you're gaining more abdominal body fat or it's difficult to lose it there, it's a sure sign most likely that there's a cortisol imbalance, but also there might be thyroid involved as well because cortisol directly affects thyroid even before it affects the sex hormones such as progesterone and estrogen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's more cortisol receptors in the midsection as well. So let's talk about thyroid. I'd love to touch on insulin and how it all is linked together.
Yeah, so one of the big things, so the whole reason our body produces cortisol is because our mind tells us we need short-term fast energy right now. And so slow energy is burning body fat. That's a great thing. We actually burn our largest percentage of body fat when we're most relaxed, right? But it's not the greatest sum, it's just the greatest percentage. And then it starts to go less and less and less the higher our heart rate goes, right? So the more stressed we are, the more we need short-term fuel source. And one of those is the production of cortisol to then break down stored glycogen in the liver, or to break down muscle tissue, which is not ideal, through gluconeogenesis, which it uses the amino acids to then convert those to glucose. Because again, sugar is not a bad thing either in terms of glucose. Glucose means it's a short-term fuel source that can then be mixed with fat as a longer-term fuel source in order to be able to fuel our energy needs. Because if we don't have those and we're running on fumes, that's when we become chronically exhausted, but also we have accelerated aging because we don't have those reserves. So we're just burning through collagen, protein, tissue. Our cells are breaking down. It's not a great place to be. So yeah, that is a hallmark of the cortisol steal. It basically just steals everything, hormones, nutrients, protein. And the reason it does that is that your body prizes survival first, not thriving in terms of hormonal balance. So always prioritize cortisol and stress, which means what we need to do is really focus on our diurnal rhythm and calming cortisol, especially the second half of the day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we've shared the symptoms and the dangers, the pitfalls, but we are going to talk about the solutions as well. So let's discuss some nutrition strategies, some training and lifestyle strategies. We'll talk about different supplements that you recommend, and then we'll move into this lab test that we are all going to get our hands on in the fall. At the Faster Way, as you know, we like to carb cycle. We are not doing a no carb, low carb lifestyle long term. Talk about the impact carbs have on cortisol.
Yeah, it's a great question. The same goes for thyroid, and the reason is that when cortisol levels are elevated, when you become stressed, what happens is your body, as I said, preferentially gives to cortisol, and that begins to slow or lower the conversion of T4 to T3 for your thyroid. And what that means is that you then might suffer the symptoms, which are different than cortisol. But cortisol is usually the first factor of cold hands and feet, dry skin, thinning hair in the scalp of the head, brain fog, low mood, low energy, and poor recovery from exercise. Like that's more low thyroid. All right, well, cortisol is also responsible for that. And then the estrogen could be estrogen dominance as well that a lot of women feel, and that's bloating during the luteal phase of your cycle, water retention, lowered mood, poor sleep, or hot flashes as well because of the estrogen receptor reactivity too. So what we do is we start to move into saying, okay, we need to peel back the onion. We could support estrogen, we could support progesterone, we could support thyroid, we could do all those things, and we want to, but really in order to fix it, we need to fix cortisol. And in order to fix that, we need to fix that HPA axis response, that stress response. And one of the best ways to do that is literally not being low carb forever.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of great plans that allow you to go low carb for a certain period of time. Sometimes up to 21 days, up to 3 weeks. After 4 to 5 weeks, we start to see thyroid suffer, especially for women, not so much men. And then the other part to that is carb cycling, which Faster Way does. And it's a great way to look at it. So basically, you are low on certain days, and then on recovery days or higher stress days, you can add in a little bit more carbohydrates. Why? Carbohydrates are the only macro that actually calm cortisol levels and excitatory neurotransmitters such as norepinephrine, which is the other part to what the adrenals produce. Norepinephrine gets the heart rate going, the blood pressure going, the body temp sometimes up to get ready for fight or flight. But then it reduces or sometimes overwhelms GABA and serotonin that your body needs to feel happy, to feel calm, to feel relaxed. So carbohydrates are not the enemy. They just have to be used wisely within an overall diet and nutrition plan to cut cortisol.
Yeah, we consume carbohydrates at certain times for certain reasons. We call carbs the happy macro. And ladies, you've heard of keto, you've heard of South Beach, guys listening as well, many different Atkins, names for a low carb or no carb diet. And sometimes on Instagram, people say, well, if you have enough protein, the protein turns into, here's the deal. It's a lot of work to eat enough protein that you're going to get the same benefits you would from just eating some carbs. Let's just have some carbs. I mean, it's just it's better
right?
and faster.
And that actually is not factually correct. It's factually correct in terms of energy, but
Yeah.
not in terms of calming cortisol or excitatory neurotransmitters.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. So again, here at the Faster Way, we consume carbs at certain times for certain reasons. We do typically a lower carb day when we are considering either an active recovery day or even a HIIT. Now, if you are dealing with cortisol dysregulation and you have full-blown adrenal fatigue, we're actually going to kind of work you up to where you could do HIIT. But initially, we're going to focus more on walking meditations and Pilates and strength training workouts instead of the high-intensity interval training. But my goal is that ultimately and eventually, you'll be able to do that HIIT on a low-carb macro day, and then we're increasing those carbohydrates on our heavier strength training days as well. Okay, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about training and lifestyle even more. What are your favorite workouts? And we've touched on it a little bit to help normalize cortisol without that overstimulation.
Yeah, so it's also looking at, and Ayurvedic medicine was really wise in looking at it. It's like these are your genetics. And then also, this is where you're at today, meaning like this is your physical constitution, and this is how stressed or not stressed you are today, right? Like in this season. So I'll give you an example. I was doing pretty well. I was busy. There's no doubt about it, but I could manage it. But I opened up my second practice. We doubled the amount of employees that we had. We doubled the amount of client appointments we did. And I had a baby at the same time, our first baby. I didn't personally have the baby. My wife did. I was just kind of there helping a little bit, right?
Thank you.
But I wasn't getting the sleep. So, when you have a child, as many people will understand, that sleep kind of goes out the window depending on your child. Now, our first baby, didn't sleep so well. So I was getting less sleep. I had double the work, like 60, 80 hours a week, lots of stress. And it was a big investment, opened up that second clinic as well. So that was high levels of stress, right? Really working the body down. During that time, could I focus then on personal best for all of my workouts and trying to hit PRs and high intensity interval training? Probably not, right? But after that season, let's call it about 6 months or so, I could then say, oh, okay, I'm back to a place where we're getting a little bit normalized sleep. Things have kind of leveled off. We've kind of hit a nice little stride. And now I can start to increase my exercise. Everyone will come through that. But what you want to have is an actual plan that you're aiming for. Like in Faster Way, you're shooting for a couple days of high intensity interval training. Usually about 2 days a week is sufficient. There's even a program, the science, I should say, called Prescription for Life. 2 days a week of sprint interval training or high intensity interval training. It's remarkable because you cut down in half the amount of aerobic based minutes you need in order to reduce all-cause mortality in cancer. So typically it's 150 minutes a week of aerobic-based training, right? So cardio. If you do high intensity interval training, it knocks it down to 75 minutes, which is pretty remarkable, right? So now we only need what, 32 and a half minutes twice a week. And so that's about what I get. I get about 30 to 40 minutes twice a week of the high intensity interval. I do 3 times a week of weight training. I've always tried to go up to 4, sometimes 5, but it's just too much inflammation in my body at my age now. And then I do a longer cardio day, which just enables me for the aerobic based capacity. It's something that I choose in my program. So you'll find what ultimately works best for you. If you're focused on body transformation, the Faster Way has the program that's going to enable you to do that, because you want to be sticking with weights. You want to be combining your cardio, your high intensity interval training with the weight training. When I had my body transformation centers, we did the same exact thing.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, I'm going to share something that is going to be a little bit, maybe, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but maybe surprising for everyone listening. There have been seasons of my life similar to you where I was highly stressed. The business was growing 1,600% that year, whatever the case may be. And I would actually plan my workout for the afternoon simply so I could assess how much stress I was under during the day. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but I wouldn't do my morning work. I would wait, because I'm like, how much am I going to be stress effective today? And I would just really listen to my body. And there were seasons, and again, everybody's shocked because I'm the CEO of the Faster Way, where I would just go on a 20-minute walk for weeks at a time. And that's all I was doing. I was getting outside, vitamin D, and that's all my body could really handle because of the stress load in that particular season. Now, right now, I do have 5 kids. I'm running a fast growing company. I have many, many employees, hundreds of contractors, but I am able to say, okay, yep, 2 HIIT per week, 3 strength training, 2 active recovery. It's working really well. But the point that I'm trying to make here is, I want you to listen to your body. I want you to really consider bio-individuality. I want you to ask yourself, man, does it seem like my cortisol is dysregulated? And what can you do right now in order to really personalize and customize this lifestyle to work for you? So I'm glad that we chatted about that a little bit. Let's discuss a few supplements, because you have a wonderful library of supplements. That's not the right term, but you know what I'm trying to say. Many that are going to support hormones. So let's talk a little bit about what you recommend.
So everything we use is based on clinical science, so backed up research at the clinical dosages, which is important, right? We know so if we're looking at, let's just say the amount of research on ashwagandha alone, let's just say is unbelievable. They've been using Ayurvedic medicine for 6,000 years, traditional Chinese medicine for over 3,000 years, backed up by science. It shows typical reduction in cortisol by about 30 to 33%, but you need to use the right dosage, which is about 400 to 600 milligrams, right? So if you see a product and it has 50 milligrams, great that it has ashwagandha maybe, but it doesn't have the ability to lower cortisol how we want. So some products increase your ability to produce cortisol. Those would be things like licorice root or DHEA, which can simply, so when your body produces hormone, it needs cholesterol. Cholesterol filters down to pregnenolone. Then pregnenolone decides, is the body stressed? All right, preferential shift then towards cortisol. If the body's not stressed, great. Now it can be used for progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and DHEA actually feeds all of those. And so when we look at that, DHEA can just kind of satisfy some of the sex hormones, because it does. So cortisol does get pulled from that. And then cortisol can take care of itself. So those are great to do for the most part. Rhodiola can be helpful, eleuthero, Siberian ginseng. But the ones that then decrease cortisol that we use at night would be something in a product called Adrenal Soothe. It has L-theanine, which is calming for the central nervous system. It has ashwagandha. It has phosphoserine. Now it has others that are great to stack with it, but those 3 just clinically proven to just calm your nervous system. Like I did a late workout, so I don't take Adrenal Soothe anymore at night, meaning like I now sleep well, all of those great things, phenomenal. But for a period of time, I didn't. Or in that season, I just always have a bottle. So what I did though, I did a hill repeat workout last night.
Wow.
And it didn't end until 6. I don't usually work out till that late at night, but that's when I was able to do it. So I did it. Called my family, just said, hey, I'll be a half hour late for dinner. Let my wife know. So she doesn't get too mad at me, a little bit mad, but not too mad, right? And then I said, I just need to get in the workout because I do my workouts at the end of the day. And that is because it just knocks all the stress down for me. Like I let it go. And then I transition to being dad and husband, which I really like. So like it's always worked for me. And so anyway, I got home and I took 2 capsules of that product at dinner and it helped bring down those cortisol along with full spectrum so magnesium, great product to calm the central nervous system. And then if you really, again, your mind is still wired, you can't get to sleep at night, you can do a little melatonin, 2.5 milligrams to 5 milligrams. One thing about melatonin is that it irreversibly drops as we get older. Every decade, we lose about 10% of our melatonin production after the age of about 30 years old. So by the time we get to 70, we produce no more than 20 to 30% of the melatonin we used to when we were in our 20s or so. And there's no real way to get that back. That's why people say like, oh, when you get older, you don't need as much sleep. People don't sleep as much. No, you need as much sleep or more when you get older. And the reason is you're more catabolic. Your body breaks down easier. You lose more muscle. You need sleep to be able to keep that on the body and obviously good nutrition. So anyway, those are easy ones we look at. If you want to talk about what we do for thyroid, estrogen, progesterone, we could talk about that too.
Okay, so DHEA, you said licorice root, adrenal soothe at night, which has the L-theanine and ashwagandha. I take L-theanine every day. I actually do a little bit in the morning with caffeine only for my ADHD. But magnesium, I agree, is really important. For me personally, I can't take melatonin. It makes me buzzed. I don't know why. If I ever do it, it's just a little kid gummies, like small children gummies, like for 3-year-olds.
It's a perfect example though, because you may not need it, right? So I believe in personalized plans for each individual, not like what's the latest thing. It's like, do you need it? Yes or no. Your labs will show that. And if you have high cortisol at night, well, it's very, very helpful. So adrenal energy support in the morning for those people that need it. I love that you're doing the L-theanine with caffeine because that gives you an increase in energy without the spike or without the hard crash. The same thing you would get in matcha by itself. So that's a great thing to do for people. 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams maximum.
Yeah, and I have these really yummy chewables of L-theanine. They taste like Smarties, but they're not full of sugar. They're so good.
Okay, so speaking of lab testing and doing what's right for you, I'm going to take the items from this test out of the package. And what you're going to see if you are watching is I have little tubes where I'm actually going to spit. And so talk with me about why the cortisol morning, noon, night total test is actually saliva versus why can't I just simply do a finger prick?
So the stress mood and metabolism test uses saliva and a finger prick, but it uses them very differently. So if you want to measure free cortisol, free testosterone, free hormone, you always look toward the saliva. It's the absolute cleanest, best way to see your levels. Now, your free testosterone will match up with your free testosterone on blood work, but the saliva is the only one that you can do from home. You can mail in the next day, or you can freeze your sample and then mail it in. And what it enables you to do is, because you can't do this with blood work unless you're literally living at the lab. I mean, how I got diagnosed with Addison's is that you actually get an injection of what's called ACTH, adrenal corticotropin hormone, which tells your adrenals to produce cortisol. They measure your blood work before, an hour later, 2 hours later. And if you don't get a rise in cortisol, you have Addison's disease. And so that's how they diagnose it. But nobody's going to say, I'm going to get my blood drawn upon waking. You need a phlebotomist at your house because that's when you do your first sample. Another blood draw before lunch, another blood draw before dinner, and then another blood draw before bed. Like they're just not going to do that. So what does conventional medicine do? They do your blood draw in the morning, right? Like that's the only normal time. Most people's cortisol falls within a normal range. Not an optimal range, but a normal range. Where it starts to become abnormal is oftentimes in the evening and suboptimal in the morning. So the saliva tubes give you all 4 showings of your cortisol. Then we add them together to ensure you're not producing too much or too little overall for the day. Those saliva tubes, they'll also measure your estrogen, progesterone, estrogen to progesterone ratio, testosterone, and DHEA sulfate.
Oh my goodness. Sign me up. So I've already told you I'm the worst patient ever. You sent this to me about 2 months ago. Let's just be honest. Uh, you said it to me 2 months ago. I did a different lab test of yours yesterday, so I'm making some progress, but I plan to do this tomorrow. Just real quick, walk me through the process, and everyone who's listening is going to have access to this lab test in the coming months. We are going to be making that available, but I'm just like, eating and then spitting, not eating and spitting, drinking, like what is it hard? Is it easy? I'm like kind of having a saliva like production situation right now because it's in front of me, and before I start drooling, I'm gonna stick it down there.
So, I mean, very, very, very easy test. Like that's the thing that we like about these. So one, it's complete privacy. You're at home. This is your lab test. The results are only ever shared with the lab, your practitioner, and well, that's literally it. Your lab and your practitioner, right? So that's and you, right? That's the third person. And so the results are never sold or shared with insurance companies or anything like that. So the thing is though, all you need to do is upon waking, before you brush your teeth, you just spit into that saliva tube. And you're just going to fill it up about halfway or 3/4 of the way. That's it. And they're pretty small tubes.
Yeah.
It might take you 3, 4, 5 minutes. You just bring up saliva in your mouth and you spit into the tube. If you're not making saliva right away, all you need to do is like cut a lemon, put it to your nose. It'll make you start to pucker a little bit and you'll start to be able to produce it. If you really can't produce saliva, swish some cold water around in your mouth, spit it out completely, wait 5 minutes so that you're not spitting water into the tube, and then that will help produce a little bit more saliva. So that's pretty easy. Then before lunch, half hour before lunch or so, or right before lunch, fill up another tube about halfway. Same with before dinner, and then same with before bed. Regardless of what time you wake up, regardless of when you go to bed, you'll just write down the time, and then you'll actually get to see your diurnal rhythm. Do you produce more cortisol between 6 and 8 in the morning, and then within ratio all the way till before bed? And if you go to bed at 11, just write down 11, whatever time you took the sample. And then all your hormones are tested in your first morning sample. So just make sure you have enough in that first morning sample so we can get all the sex hormones that we spoke about.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, final question as we wrap up here. So I have a lot of ladies listening in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. I have some faster way fellas listening, but I also have some coaches, some clients in their 20s, 30s. I've got some recent coaches who are college students coming on. I personally have struggled with hormones at different times of my life. I'm in my late 30s now, but do you have different recommendations for women who are in perimenopause, menopause versus ladies who are a little bit younger, or is everything that we just said pretty standard across the board?
So we run that same lab test. That lab test also includes your TSH levels for your thyroid, free T4, free T3, TPO antibodies for autoimmune issues, insulin and hemoglobin A1C, as well as vitamin D3. So it's the most comprehensive metabolic test out there. Now, keep in mind, 1 out of 5 women have functionally low thyroid. About 1 out of 8 to 10 men have lower thyroid. All of this affects what we shared before, which was the dry skin, thinning hair, low mood, low libido, brain fog, poor recovery from exercise, right? So that's a big one. A lot of women in earlier years as well will have to deal with estrogen dominance or PCOS. So it looks at that. So if your estrogen to progesterone ratio is low, even if you don't have high levels of estrogen, but you might have low levels of progesterone, potentially because of a cortisol-based issue, it will show that. And your symptoms will feel like stubborn weight gain, bloating during the luteal phase, irritability, low mood, what else? Adult-based acne, oilier skin, poor sleep, right? It'll show, here's the reasons why. So what this does is it takes your symptoms, which are really important, and it puts a root cause behind it. And then you can go about re-regulating those naturally. So it's used literally for all ages. I ran it when I was 19 years old, when I first started to see natural health-based practitioners. And it was invaluable for me because I'm like, oh, I have no cortisol production. But the crazy thing is, all my hormones were also low. Because when your body becomes exhausted, everything begins to go low because your body's running on fumes. So now I have that information. Unfortunately, I took the information to my medical doctor, who then put me on pharmaceuticals for Florinef for blood pressure-based issues, low blood pressure, which happens with Addison's disease, as well as Cortef to start producing or giving me cortisol. And that delayed my actual root cause healing for another year while I was doing that. But again, we all learn, we all grow. I had my learning, and ultimately, again, now it's come full circle. The amazing thing is, who thought I'd ever be able to offer these labs to try to help others. And so whether you have Addison's disease, autoimmune issues, type 2 diabetes, everything has an underlying root cause, and you can figure it out. And this lab certainly helps with that.
Okay, I love it. I love it. In summary, some of the solutions, if your cortisol is dysregulated, we want you to consume carbs on certain days for certain reasons, okay? If you follow the Fast Away meal plan, you are carb cycling. That's actually foolproof. Follow the meal plan to a T. That is what I'm doing this week. That's what our trainers do. Really, really great. We want you potentially to scale back on high intensity interval training right now, although future state, I want you to be joining us for those 2 HIIT workouts per week: strength training, walking, Pilates, yoga with the Faster Way. So important. We want you to be sleeping. Okay. We shared some different ideas for supplementation. I personally start with coffee, as I mentioned, then I switch to matcha. You never know until you really do a genetic test how you metabolize caffeine. But in my case, 1 cup of coffee is sufficient. And then I'm moving on to matcha, which has been phenomenal for my afternoon energy too. And whole food nutrition. We want to eliminate inflammation. You shared that when you were 17, your gut health was completely wrecked. You were inflamed. You tanked your hormones. Whole food nutrition, eliminating all the foods you mentioned too, by the way. I'm like, oh yeah, when I was like 13, I was having my iced tea and, all those things. Delicious at the time. And, so whole food nutrition, really everything that we are teaching in the Faster Way. Is there maybe one final piece of advice that you want to share with our listeners?
So everything you said is right on. And if you can only focus on one thing, it's focusing on your sleep. So like that has to come first, because you can mitigate your current circumstances if you're not sleeping, doing all of the things, but long term, you need to dial in the sleep. And so we love to start there. And the other thing is just take an assessment of your life. And you say, like, what takes energy out of my body? What brings energy in? And that's kind of how you have to look at it. And some things you might not be able to change. Some people are in jobs they don't love right now, right? So that's causing a super amount of stress. All right, well, maybe over the next 6 months or so, we can find a job that you do like, right? But in the meantime, we need to then help with everything else. And the other part I just wanted to say on the exercise is that, yes, for now, you might just be doing walking and yoga and more gentler things. But the goal isn't to stay there. The goal is you're there now. And then within the next 12 weeks, you want to start to create what are called hermetic stressors. And gently then adding in, okay, so we're going from walking. Let's do some weight-based training, maybe more body weight in the beginning. And then we start to add weights. Okay, how did that do once or twice a week? Good, not so bad. Great. After that, then we start to add in low-level HIIT training. So we can start to say, okay, how does the body adapt with that just once a week? Oh, I felt a little exhausted for the next 48 hours. All right, let me wait another week or two. And then, so the goal is always challenge the body, but do it respectfully based on where you're at right now and part of your recovery-based process.
Awesome. Stephen, you are the best. Where can we find and follow you online?
My website is just stephencabral.com, Stephen with a PH, kind of sends you over to Instagram and my podcast, The Cabral Concept, all the different places. But always a pleasure speaking with you and your community. You're doing such an amazing job, literally, for so many women and the fellas, but also all of the people that they touch, right? Because every mom or head of household or person of the family then shares this with their kids or grandkids. And that's what this is all about.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable tips with us and your wisdom. We appreciated hearing your experience and story. Everyone, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye.